Will your family be the first to witness the birth of the incredible Nintendo Entertainment System? Will you be the first to see, to touch, to play with Rob, the extraordinary video robot? He follows the commands you put on screen to help you tackle even the toughest challenge. Will you be the first to raise the incredibly accurate Zapper and play games like Duck Hunt and Hogan's Alley? The first to build a library of game packs like Kung Fu and Golf? Even games like Excitebike that you program yourself. Will you be the first to get all this in one package? The Nintendo Entertainment System, where video technology is more than a game.
Hey there, Retro Games fans, this is Andy C from Piece of 8-Bit. Welcome to the end of my month with the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System. I have been living with the console for a month as part of my Month With series, where I take a console for a whole month, I put it in the living room, I play some games on it, and I come back and I tell you what it's been like to play with potentially an old console or a reimagined console for the last 4 weeks. So yeah, like I say, this month has been the wondrous and legendary Nintendo Entertainment System. So what we're going to do in today's video is we're going to talk a little bit about the history of the console itself, so how it came to be and why the NES is somewhat of a phenomenon. And we are also going to be talking about some of the hardware specs and how it compared to its rivals. We'll be talking about what games I've been playing, most importantly, the games make the console, of course, and we will be talking about all the games I've been playing. And I'll tell you what, there has been a lot of games this month. I've played loads of stuff, so we'll cover that as well. I'll talk to you a little bit about how you can get back into NES gaming in 2026, and there are loads of ways of doing it, so I'll give you some tips on that as well. And then I will give you my verdict at the end and tell you what it has been like to live with the NES. And of course, I will also be revealing what my next month's console for April is going to be and what I'm going to be living with. So I'm super excited about that one as well, as I always am. Anyone who watches this channel knows I'm always super excited about new consoles to play with for a month, but I'm particularly excited about this one. This is one of my faves, so yeah, stick around to the end to see that as well. Obviously, if you do want to just skip through to the different sections if they're interesting to you, then you just click on the chapters below and you take yourself off to the section that you're most interested in. Obviously, as always, I would love to hear all of your comments and thoughts and memories of the Nintendo Entertainment System. Yeah, just drop a comment in the section below and let me know your thoughts. Let's get right into it, and I'm going to talk now straight away about the history and development and legacy of the Nintendo Entertainment System. I'll see you in there. Right, let's get into the history of the NES, and the story really begins in 1983 with Nintendo's Japanese console, the Nintendo Family Computer, better known as the Famicom, designed by legendary Nintendo engineer Masayuki Uemura. The system was built to bring arcade-style experiences into the home, something which Nintendo had already experimented with through its Game & Watch handhelds and arcade machines. And technically, the machine was pretty modest, actually. We'll get into the hardware in the next section. Needless to say, it was not a particularly rapid piece of kit. But what really set the system apart was obviously not raw power. It was Nintendo's approach to software quality and developer control, I suppose. Now, the timing of the NES arriving, of course, is somewhat fascinating. When the Famicom launched in Japan in July 1983, the video game industry in North America was actually in somewhat of a state of terminal decline. The infamous video game crash in 1983 had pretty much all but destroyed consumer confidence in consoles, and retailers were now wary of stocking games, and many believe the industry might never recover. Some believing, in fact, that it was just going to be a passing fad and disappear into the night. So when Nintendo decided to bring the system to the US in 1985, they made a crucial decision. Instead of marketing it as a traditional console, Nintendo redesigned the hardware and sold it as the entertainment system. So out went the bright red Famicom design, and in came the front-loading grey system that looked, well, was purposely styled to look like a front-loading VCR and fit in with the aesthetic of your living room at the time. Nintendo even bundled it with accessories like the NES Zapper, which is here, and the ROB, the Robotic Operating Buddy, to help convince retailers that it was something more than just another games console. And the packing game that introduced millions of players to the system? Well, we all know that, of course. It was Super Mario Brothers. Yes, fabulous. There we go, Super Mario Brothers. In fact, this is the Duck Hunt version I've got here as well. What happened next was extraordinary. Something of a miracle, you might say, in fact. The NES didn't just succeed. It was responsible, if not in part, for reviving the entire video game industry, certainly in North America anyway. Critics and players were blown away by the quality of its games, and its strict seal of quality licensing its quality licensing program ensured that most titles met a consistent standard. So by the 1990s, the NES had become the dominant console of the 8-bit era, all ready and perfectly placed for the next 16-bit phase. Oh, and also let's not forget about the Game Boy, which comfortably rode on the coattails of the NES. Across its lifetime, the system sold around 62 million units worldwide, with roughly 34 million of those in North America alone. And during its peak years, it held over 80% of the console market in the United States. The real magic, of course, came from the games, which we'll talk about later on. The NES introduced players to some of the most iconic franchises in gaming history. Super Mario Brothers, The Legend of Zelda, Metroid, Mega Man, amongst many. And these weren't just successful titles. They created gameplay ideas and design philosophies that are still influencing games even today. Even after its successor, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or the SNES, which launched in 1990, the NES continued selling for years, thanks to its enormous library and affordable price. Developers kept pushing the hardware further and further, producing late generation games like we've seen before, such as Kirby's Adventure, that looked almost impossible on an 8-bit machine. So in the end, the NES didn't just help to save gaming, it really defined the blueprint for the modern console industry, and we still see that impact right now in 2026. Strong first-party games, careful developer licensing, and characters that were essentially global cultural icons. So not bad, you might say, for a machine that only had 2K of RAM. Talking of which, let's go and have a look at the hardware specifications of the Nintendo Entertainment System. I'll see you there. Alright then, let's talk about hardware of the NES and its main competitor, the Sega Master System. There was also the Atari 7800, I should say, but that was just a footnote compared to these two, really. It sold a quarter of what the Sega Master System sold, and it sold, I guess, I'm trying to think what now, probably 5% maybe of what the about 5% of what the total units sold were for the NES, but we'll come on to the sales figures in a minute. In terms of cost, broadly similar, so about $200 for the Master System versus about $180 for the Nintendo Entertainment System. The NES had a 2-year head start in terms of its development, so it was designed and released in Japan in 1983. Compared to 1985 for the Sega Master System. So the Master System had, I guess, a 2-year advantage in terms of technology, and in the 80s, a 2-year advantage in technology is like light years. It's a huge advantage, I suppose, in some ways. But obviously, Nintendo were already in the door, already selling by that point. In terms of when it released elsewhere, so 1985 in North America for the NES and 1986 for the Master System, so not quite such a big gap, but still a year. And 1986, we had to wait 3 years for the NES in the UK and Europe. It came out here in 1986 and in 1987 for the Master System in Europe as well. But so we didn't have to wait quite as long for the Master System as we did for the NES, but we still had to wait, and that was annoying. So let's dig into the hardware then. So I mentioned before about the fact that the NES's hardware is somewhat modest, and you'll see that as we go down the list here, and then we'll come to the sales figures, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So the CPU was a Recode 2803, which is a MOS 6502 derivative running at 1.79 megahertz. The Master System comparatively is running a Zilog Z80. I think it's a Zilog Z80A actually, which is running at 3.58 megahertz. So nearly twice as quick on paper the Master System is compared to the NES. In terms of memory, again a big leap. We've got 2K of system RAM on the NES versus 8K of system RAM on the Master System. I think in a previous video I mentioned when I was talking about the tricks to the NES, I think I mentioned that it had 16K. It does have 16K, but that's video RAM, not main RAM. So 8K of system RAM on the Master System, and then video RAM, as I just mentioned, 16K on the Master System and 2K. Only 2K, so 4K of memory in total on the NES compared to 24K of memory on the Master System, split from 8 on system RAM, 16 on video RAM, and the NES 2 system RAM and 2 video RAM. So much less in terms of power there as well, in terms of RAM there as well. Graphics chip is running the Ricoh 2C02 PPU versus Sega's VDP processor, and that is capable of running on the NES at a resolution of 256 by 240 with a 54 colour palette and 25 colours on the screen at any given time. It's on the Sega, it's 256 by 192, so it's slightly lower resolution, but only very slightly. 64 colours possible, so more colours, and 32 colours on the screen as well. So potentially the games can be a little bit more colourful. You're able to both systems were able to display 64 sprites, but on the NES that was only 8 sprites per scan line. And if you watched my video last week, I talk about some of the tricks that developers use to get around some of these limitations. That one in particular was quite clever. Audio, nothing to get too excited about. 5-channel internal sound on the NES versus the PSG sound chip on the Sega Master System, which I think is a Yamaha chip. 8-bit sound, not much between it really. Some great music incidentally on both systems, some of the games on there. In terms of media, we had the ROM cartridges, which had this sort of MMC technology later on, so allowed you to do things like bank switching, bring a little bit more memory to the games on the NES, because it had that limitation. So they were quite clever with what they did with cartridge technology. But ROM cartridges on both platforms. The Sega Master System also had, on the first generation of Sega Master System, something called Sega cards, which I never really used. I never really had those. So yes. And then in terms of accessories, obviously both systems had a zapper. So we had the NES zapper on the on the NES, and we also had a light phaser on the Master System as well. And there were a number. Both systems had lots of different weird and wonderful things as well. I mentioned Rob, the robot for the NES as well. I think there was a glove, a gauntlet thing as well that you could get, all sorts of strange things that people were experimenting with back at the time. So let's look at units sold then. So but on the basis of all of that, then the Master System pretty much comes out on top on everything in terms of raw power, a significantly quicker processor, vastly more memory, more colours, the ability to display more sprites, generally speaking a much more established machine in terms of hardware. But when you look at units sold, 62 million units of the NES were sold, making it one of the most successful consoles of all time. Practically half of which were sold in the US, into a market where people weren't even sure whether gaming was going to last. So that is just testament to how much Nintendo's strategy really works. Comparatively, 13 million units of the Master System were sold. Only just over 3 million units of the 7800, just to give you some context there as well. So 13 million units is still pretty respectable for the time, but nothing like the 62 million, nearly 5 times the amount sold of the NES for Nintendo. So that's a really big deal. And of course, obviously that led into the success of the SNES and the Game Boy, which came after. Nintendo really established itself at that point, and Sega was always playing catch up forever and ever and ever. Interestingly though, the Sega Master System, an interesting point about that is it was really popular in Brazil. And in fact, in Brazil, they were the only territory to have the Sega Master System 3, distributed by a company called Tectoy, and they continued to make the Master System, get this, until 2015. It was an incredibly popular, it was like a phenomenon in Brazil. Very, very strange. So that was a very, very strong market for Sega. Also in the UK as well. Here in the UK, Sega did quite well. They did better than in a lot of other territories. I think it was just, I don't know, Sega always felt a bit more gritty and a bit cooler, and certainly in the UK, and so it sold very well here as well. But generally, overall, 62 million units versus 13 million units. So there you go, and proof, if ever it were needed, that you don't have to have the most powerful console to have the best sales in any given particular generation. And Nintendo have demonstrated that time and time and time again. I can list them. So you look at the Nintendo DS and the PSP, massively outsold the PSP. PSP was fantastic, by the way, sold a lot of units. Nintendo sold more with the DS. You saw more sales. Well, Sony in the PlayStation 2 generation, of course, bucked that trend. They were the least powerful console in that trend, and it's the most successful console of all time, despite being less powerful than the GameCube from Nintendo and Microsoft's Xbox, of course. But then we saw it with Nintendo, with the Switch, with the Nintendo Wii. Those two consoles, both less powerful than their generational equivalents, massively outselling a lot of their competitors at each point as well. So demonstration, if ever it were needed. It's about the games, and it's about the marketing, and it's about how you position the console and what you want to do it as. When you look at the Wii, for instance, what Nintendo did was they said, you know what, we're not going to compete against Microsoft and Sony for raw power with the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360. What we're going to do, to let them get on with it. They're going to have these entertainment platforms. What we're going to do is something completely different, and that's what they did with the Wii. And ultimately, we got a GameCube plus with the Wii, but with these funny controllers that you could get your grandma to come and play bowling on, and they absolutely romped home. It was amazing. So it's all about that innovation, how you position yourself, that makes the big difference, not those raw stats there. So really fascinating just how much more powerful the Master System was actually, but demonstration, if ever it were needed, that doesn't always matter. All right, let's now get into some of the games that I have been playing throughout this month. I'll see you in there. Now, everybody who watches the Month With series knows what I'm about to say, because I think it's really important, and that is the games make the console. And I say this as well a lot as well, you know, this month it's really true. Probably there is no other console where that statement is more true than on the NES, and that is because of the things we talked about before. Nintendo's quality seal of approval really changed everything forever. By limiting what you could put on the platform, it meant that we didn't just have just a load of nonsense. It had to go through Nintendo's checks. We've seen it, other companies employ this sort of thing, like Apple much more recently with its App Store, meaning that you know that you're going to get a game, or you know you're going to get an app that's going to work. It was very similar with Nintendo back in the day, and I'm sure it was probably controversial. I'm sure some people thought that there was too much control, or those kind of things. But ultimately, what it meant was that the games that we got on Nintendo consoles back then, and even all the way up to today, were always of a good standard and a good quality. And I say always. There are some weird and wonderful games on the NES for sure, but the big titles, the big AAA titles, as we would call them nowadays, were just flawless in terms of the quality and that kind of thing. I mean, you didn't have the ability to get updates back then, so what you put on that cartridge, and cartridges were also very expensive, had to be right. And so, that was a big part of it. So the games were important. And what a selection of games there has been as well. I've played loads, and there's some games I never even got to. I never even got to Metroid. I never even got to Mega Man. But I've had to write on my board, so you'll see me glancing over here, because there's so many games that I've played, some of which I've had as some of the features throughout this month. So let's run through some of them. Now, no month with Nintendo would be complete without, of course, the Super Mario games. So I did a feature earlier on. I talked about Mario and how much of an impact Mario had on the gaming industry, and whether Mario, with the help of the NES or vice versa, helped to really revitalise gaming, and he certainly was incredibly important. I've been playing all three of the Mario games, the Super Mario Brothers games I should say, on the platform. Super Mario Brothers 1, of course, which is one of the most iconic and well-known games ever made. Also played Super Mario Brothers 2, which was an unusual one because there are two versions of Super Mario Brothers 2. So there's what we would see as the Lost Levels, which if you get Super Mario All-Stars on the SNES, you'll see the Lost Levels on there. Or if you go and play it on the Nintendo Switch emulator for NES, you'll see it on there as well. It's called the Lost Levels for us in Europe and North America. In Japan, that was Super Mario 2, and it is really, really difficult. It's very frustrating. So actually what Nintendo America did was they relaunched it as they took another game and basically stripped it out, put new characters in it, and we got Super Mario 2, which is a bit of an odd one out. It doesn't feel like most Mario games. It's kind of unusual, but it's a very pretty looking game and it's got a great soundtrack. Some people really love it. Some people are like, it's not proper Mario. But I had a good play with that. Quite enjoyed that. And obviously Super Mario Brothers 3, which in my opinion is the best of the three. It takes all of the lessons learned from the first two and just creates this amazing game. And of course it's quite late in the Nintendo Entertainment System's life cycle as well, so the developers are able to get around some of the limitations and really squeeze the power of the machine and produce a game that looks fantastic, feels like proper Mario, and is still very, very playable today. So love Super Mario Brothers 3. So those are the Super Mario games. I also looked at some of the hardest games on the platform as well. So we looked at Battletoads. We looked at Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and of course the incredibly difficult Ghosts and Goblins, the arcade port of the same name. One of the hardest games in history, to be honest with you. It is incredibly tough, but a great fun game nonetheless. And we also looked at Ninja Gaiden, and I did a video on those 4 games a couple of weeks back. Really enjoyed playing those, but boy are they tough. Some other absolute classics as well. Ice Climber, which is a slightly less known one, but love Ice Climber. Good little sort of vertical scrolling game when you get to the top of the mountain. That's really good fun. Played Kirby's Adventure and Contra, which were sort of later in the NES life cycle, and we talked about those last week in sort of regard of some of the tips and tricks that people used to use. Love Kirby, great game. Played that for ages. Played a lot of Kirby. Kirby's Adventure, that is. Really, really enjoyed that. And of course Contra, what a fantastic game Contra is. Such a good game. It's quite hard as well. It's also pretty tricky. But lots of fun, and uses lots of clever techniques for getting all of the action on the screen. It just works really well. It looks fantastic for an 8-bit game, especially. It looks amazing. So really, really enjoyed Contra and Kirby, sort of later titles in the NES life cycle. Went right back to the beginning, played a bit of Donkey Kong and a bit of Donkey Kong Jr. again, and a really, really good arcade port, and I did it in the bit between last week, I think it was, earlier this week actually. Really, really enjoyed playing Donkey Kong. Such a good fun game. It's a real pick up and play game. Again, quite difficult. A bit of luck involved, I think, as well, but mostly skill, maybe. It is a great game, and it's an incredible legacy as well. Donkey Kong is sort of really up there with. It's getting close to being also one of the most iconic sort of Nintendo-owned characters. So really, really love Donkey Kong, and really enjoyed getting back and playing that one, and Donkey Kong Jr. 2 as well. I'll generally seek those out in the arcade, and they are fantastic ports. And then finally, of course, one of the most iconic games in Nintendo's library generally, but certainly one of the most iconic games on the NES, and that was Legend of Zelda, which, for those of you who watched my bit between a couple of weeks back, you will know that actually Legend of Zelda is not a game that I'd ever really played before. I played a lot of the newer, more modern Zeldas, and I really like those, but never played the original Legend of Zelda or Legend of Zelda 2, which is a game I still haven't played. I need to go back and play that. So I had a bit of a playthrough of that. It wasn't a shining example of how well to play a game, I can tell you that much for nothing, but I was starting to get into it and I absolutely loved it, and I have spent a lot of time watching other people play Zelda, seen lots of clips of it over the years, and it is an absolutely amazing game, and I'm actually currently playing through Wind Waker on the GameCube, actually. And the legacy, that original Zelda game, the heart of that game is very much embedded in a lot of the modern Zelda games as well. You can absolutely see that. And I say modern, I mean Wind Waker's probably 23, 24 years old as well. So I guess, do you still call that modern? I don't know, it's still pretty old. But anyway, either way, I would still class that as a modern game, and you can definitely see that influence from the original Zelda games in there. So loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of games played. I didn't think I'd get much time to play it, but the nice thing about Nintendo games is you can just pick them up, and a lot of them you can just play for a few minutes here and there. So yes, I have really, really enjoyed playing all of those games. It has been absolutely fantastic, and I'm kind of loath to put it back, but the advantages, of course, which I will discuss in the next section, there are lots of ways of playing Nintendo Entertainment System games without having one of these beautiful grey boxes over here. So let's get into that, and I will tell you how you can get back into NES gaming in 2026. So if you like the sound of all of those games, then you can get back into NES gaming, and it is so easy to do in 2026. Now, first of all, well, should you do it? Well, we'll talk about my verdict to that at the end, but I'm just going to give it a bit of a spoiler alert here. Yeah, you absolutely should. There's some fantastic games in there, and you absolutely need to go and play them. Now, there are several ways of doing it, many ways of doing it, in fact. First up is, obviously, you can go and get yourself a Nintendo Entertainment System console. They are, surprisingly, considering how old they are, not that expensive. I mean, you will probably pick a decent NES up. I can't remember how much I paid for this, not more than £100. And this is a really, really good example of one. Now, the downside of picking up one of these original ones is that you might find that there are a few problems. It's a very old machine. I did a video a few weeks back where I replaced the cartridge slot at the back of the machine. So I took the machine apart and replaced the cartridge slots. They do wear out. It's a relatively cheap and easy procedure, so go check out my video if you have bought a NES and you're having trouble getting your cartridges read. I'll tell you how to clean them, but I'll also tell you how to replace that cartridge slot in the back. So you might need to do that. You don't necessarily need someone to do it for you. You'll probably find that it's actually a simple job. There's no soldering involved, and it's quite cheap to do. So that is one possibility. Get yourself a NES. Now, obviously, the problem with NES is, probably buying a NES is getting hold of the games, actually. You can find them online. There are lots of games out there, but I've found them to be harder and harder to find as the years have gone on. I think a lot of collectors are hoarding them, like myself, and I don't have that many, I might add. And so you don't see loads of them around. If you go in the UK, we've got a company called Computer Exchange, CEX. It's rare. They do sell them, but I don't see that many, certainly not in my local one to choose from. And you'll see a lot of the same ones over and over again. Things like Super Mario Brothers, you'll see loads of times. Super Mario Brothers 3. Donkey Kong I see quite a lot. Some of them you just don't see very often. Turtles, that's one I saw, but yeah, a lot of them you don't see very often. One thing you should look out for, though, is the Legend of Zelda one, which is on a gold cartridge, which is really quite fetching. But yeah, you don't see a lot of them about. So getting the games can be a little bit tricky. So there are some other options for you. First option is one of these things here, which is called a... it's basically a Nintendo Entertainment System. It's a mini version of it. Comes with a load of the sort of the games you'd expect to find. So you'll find Legend of Zelda on here. You'll find all the Marios on here. Ice Climber, I think, was on here. I think I played it on this. So a lot of the games I've played this month, actually, I haven't played on the NES itself. I've played on here or on my next option, which is coming up as well. But yeah, these are quite good. I don't think they make these anymore, so you'll have to go hunting for one. I think I paid about £60 or £70 for one of these. The nice thing about this is you've got HDMI on the back, and it's just powered by USB micro. So nice and easy. Comes with one controller. The only downside to it is that the controller lead is very, very short. I don't know why they've done that. So it means that playing it on your TV means you've got to sit about 2 foot from the TV, and that's not reminiscent of the original consoles, because they came with a really decent lead. They came with a really nice long lead. So good sort of, I don't know how long it is, maybe 3 meters perhaps. I don't know. Perhaps maybe that's longer than I thought, but certainly plenty of lead there. I can sit on the sofa and I can plug it into the TV and I can play with no trouble at all. That, on the other hand, I've got to sit about 2 foot from the television, which is a bit bonkers. But there's lots of good games on there, and it's nice and easy to use. It's very easy to power, and relatively inexpensive. So yeah, like I say, a lot of the games I've played this month, I've not actually played on the NES. Which leads me into my third option, and that is if you've got a Nintendo Switch or a Nintendo Switch 2, there is a, you have to pay for the annual subscription. I honestly think it's worth it if you want to play some retro games, because you've got quite a few consoles on there. If you've got the Switch 2, you get the GameCube. That's only on the Switch 2, but on these both systems you get the NES, the SNES, Game Boy Advance, and the Mega Drive of all things as well, and N64. You also get the N64. So and there's quite a lot of games in the back catalogue, not all in there, but again, a lot of the games I've played this month I haven't owned the cartridges for, so I've been able to play those either on the Switch or on the NES Mini. So there's a couple of really good options for you there as well, nice and straightforward. There is also the opportunity to play on on an emulator. So if you've got the cartridges but you don't necessarily own the hardware, obviously you can go and grab yourself an emulator. To be honest with you, if you've got a Switch, just don't bother, just get the subscription and do it that way if you're that way inclined. But you can go and get emulators. There are loads of emulators out there. They've been around for years and they're really, really good. I use a system on here called on my Mac called OpenEMU. There's also Launchbox, and they come bundled with emulators as well. And then you just need to go online and find the ROMs for them that correspond to the cartridges that you've got. And then behind me here running is actually an emulator on there as well, which is on a Raspberry Pi using something called RetroPie. And again, that will come with the NES emulator already set up. So there's nothing that you need to do to go and set that up. It's all ready to go. And you just need the ROMs to do that. So as long as you own the ROMs from a legal position, I have to say this, as long as you own the ROMs, you can go and get the ROM files online, and yeah, you can pop those in your emulator as well. Don't quote me on any legal ramifications from one region to the next on whether you should back up your games or not. I don't know, don't take my word for it, but that is one option for you as well. Very easy to do. And actually I've got some, this is obviously a SNES controller, but a lot of websites you can go to, you can buy relatively inexpensive sort of replica USB style controllers. I have got a couple of NES ones as well, which work great, and so you can use those for playing your NES games if you want that authentic experience. I generally use this for pretty much everything, whether it's Master System, Mega Drive, SNES, NES, whatever. It's only really when you play some of the newer consoles that you want something a bit more modern, like your PS4 controller. So there you go. That is how you get into it. There's lots of options. You will also find, if you go on sites like Temu and AliExpress, they do like 50 bazillion console games in one things and stuff like that. You can get them on there as well. There's a lot of games on there, but the legality of that and the licensing of that is almost certainly a pretty grey area, so just watch out for that. So there you go, that is it. That is how you get back into NES gaming in 2026. So now what we're going to do is just kind of wrap up. I'm just going to tell you what it's been like to live with the NES, and then I am going to reveal to you what my console is for next month. I'll see you in there. So then, what has it been like to live with a Nintendo Entertainment System for the month of March in 2026? Well, it's been great, actually. I've really enjoyed it, but there are some caveats to that. So ultimately, with a console of this age, there are some problems. I probably should have mentioned this in the how do you get back into console gaming in 2026, NES console gaming in 2026, because actually hooking this up to your TV is not straightforward. So you will need an analog to digital converter. Now I use something called an OSSC, which I've used for pretty much every console I've got. That doesn't work with this. It's to do with the analog signal that it's outputting, and it just doesn't work. You can get the audio out and you can use the component and get it all in green if you want to, but it doesn't really work very well. So I've actually had to use some cheaper analog to digital converters to get the signal into the television. So you can buy them from Amazon for anything between sort of £6 and maybe £30. The cheap ones will work better than some of the more expensive things like OSSC. So that is a bit of a challenge, and as a result, some of the games that I've played on the NES, the quality has not been great because I've had to pass it through the converter into the television, which has been a bit of a problem. The other issue that I've also had is that I mentioned that the cartridge slot reader just wasn't working. So right at the beginning of the month, and I was really struggling to get some of my cartridges to load, and this has been an ongoing problem with this NES that I've got. It's a common problem. So I thought, well, I might as well just do a video and show you how to replace the cartridge slot in the back, which I have done, and has breathed new life into this unit, and I'm very lucky to have this one because there's no yellowing on this console or anything. The controllers are in good condition, the machine is in great condition, and now with that new cartridge slot it feels like a new machine, which is fantastic. But obviously there is still that issue again in the TV. So to be honest with you, most of the month width that I've been doing has been using either this, which is the NES Mini, which I mentioned in the last section, and actually quite a lot of it on the Switch. So it's only really been when I've had games that I've only got a cartridge for and they're not on either one of those other two platforms have I ended up playing on the actual unit itself. So there's a couple of games that I've played on there at length, but to be honest with you, actually having the physical NES console, I haven't really made that much use of it. But I have been playing NES games all month, so in a way I can continue to do that because most of the way that I'm doing it is not through the hardware, which is going to come back in here in a short while anyway. So yes, I have really enjoyed playing NES games. I haven't necessarily enjoyed the experience of having the original console itself back in the living room because I just haven't really used it that much. For the reasons that I've just sort of stated there. But nevertheless, the games that I've played, the NES games that I've been playing, are absolutely fantastic. And I saw an article recently actually where someone was saying that, you know, these games, you know, they should be left in the past, and you know, they're no good now, and they're just nonsense and people don't get it anymore. And I could not disagree more with that statement, because ultimately these games, it doesn't matter about the graphics. I've spoken about this so many times before. It's all about that innovation and that gameplay. That's where it's at. And if you can get your kids to play these games and they enjoy it, that is testament to the innovation and the creativity of the game itself, not just the fact that it looks amazing or looks realistic. So I've really enjoyed it. And if you know, from that section where I talked about all the games that I've been playing, that huge list of games on there, and that's because I've just really enjoyed having an excuse to go back and play NES games. And I know I'm in no doubt that I'm going to continue to go and play those games. I just get the urge every now and again to go and play Mario or to go and play Kirby's Adventure. You know, I'm going to want to go and play those games again. I often do anyway. So yeah, that's been fantastic. So there you go. I strongly advise you go and check out some of those NES games that I've talked about and get yourself back into NES. Maybe not necessarily with the original hardware, but there's so many ways of doing it anyway that you just don't need it. But if you are a collector, of course, it's a great thing to have on your shelf. It's a great thing to have plugged in if you are lucky enough to be able to do that. So there you go. That is my month with the NES, all complete. So, question is, part of my what's coming up in the channel, what is the console that I'm going to be using for next month? Okay, so drum roll please. The next console is a handheld, and it is this, the Game Boy Advance. And this, I mentioned before, this is one of my favourites, and it really is. I love this. Now, I will probably be playing, this is the original Game Boy Advance, obviously, in the nice box I picked up last year from Blackpool, but I will probably be spending most of my time using this. The Game Boy Advance SP is where it's at if you're going to play on a Game Boy Advance, because it's backlit and it's a fantastic little machine. I absolutely love this. And in some ways, it's sort of got, you know, when you fold it out like that, it's got that proper Game Boy feel about it, but obviously you can have your screen like that, and it's got a lovely little screen on it, great battery life, and yeah, I don't have millions of games for it. I used to own one of these, and then I sold it like so many of the consoles I got, and I got rid of all the cartridges that I had as well. Some amazing games. I've had to start recollecting them again, which is, I've got a few now, but not loads, but there are a few games that I wanted to play anyway, which I've gone and bought again. Which we'll be playing. So that is what we're going to be doing. The reason I picked a handheld is I'm going to be traveling this month. I always like to do a handheld if I've got a holiday or I've got some time away, because I'll be playing it on the move. And I think that's always the thing with these handhelds, is playing these games on the move. That's when you really see how good these units are. So there you go. Yeah, look out for lots of Game Boy Advance content over the next few weeks. Some bit-betweens and a few little sort of documentary pieces on the Game Boy Advance. And yeah, that's probably about it. So if you enjoyed these videos, hope you enjoyed that little walk down memory lane for the NES. Yeah, and if you enjoy these videos generally, please do hit that like and subscribe button. Really do appreciate your support. Thank you so much to everybody who's clicked that up to now. And yeah, obviously hit that bell icon as well if you want some notifications. If you're interested in the GBA content through this month, obviously click that bell icon to make sure you don't miss anything. Let me know your thoughts and comments below. Let me know your memories of the NES, and also let me know your memories of the GBA. And if you've got any thoughts on any games you think I should play as part of the bit between, do let me know on that as well. Just leaves me to say, yeah, please do all take care of yourselves. I will see you in the next one. Until then, bye for now.